Imagine the scene. Red carpets rolled out, flags billowing in the wind, military guards in ceremonial uniforms standing at attention. Cameras flash as Xi Jinping, the president of China, steps forward personally, not delegating to aides, not sending his foreign minister, but personally extending his hand to two of the most important leaders of our time, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It is not just a gesture of welcome. It is a calculated performance, a message crafted for the world to see. At that moment, 3 continents, 3 histories, 3 sets of ambitions converge into one striking image of solidarity. And the question everyone is asking is simple. Why now, and what does it mean for the future of the global order? The optics are powerful, no doubt. But behind the optics lie years of tension, ambition, betrayal, and strategy. To truly understand what we are witnessing, we must peel back the layers one by one and look not only at the here and now, but at the long road that has brought these nations together and the uncertain road that lies ahead. This is not just a summit. It is a signal, a warning, perhaps even the beginning of a new chapter in world politics. Let's begin with the most immediate context. The United States has just imposed a staggering 50% tariff on Indian exports, punishing New Delhi for continuing to buy discounted Russian oil. Overnight, the Indian rupee hit a record low. The stock markets tumbled. For ordinary Indians, it felt like a sudden shock. For policymakers in Delhi, it felt like betrayal. After years of strategic partnership with Washington, after the Quad Alliance, after deepening defense and technology ties, India found itself targeted, not supported. This, more than anything else, sets the stage for Modi's visit to China. For Xi Jinping, the opportunity could not be more perfect. China has long wanted to position itself as the leader of a new global South, a counterweight to American influence. By hosting both Modi and Putin in Tianjin, she sends a powerful message. The West cannot isolate Russia, and it cannot fully control India. Beijing can bring them together even with all their contradictions, and in doing so, showcase itself as the gravitational center of an emerging multipolar order. For Vladimir Putin, the symbolism is equally important. Russia has been battered by sanctions, isolated in the West, cut off from markets and technology. Yet here he is, standing shoulder to shoulder with the leaders of the world's 2 most populous nations. For his domestic audience, it is proof that Russia is not a pariah. For his global audience, it is a reminder that Moscow still has powerful friends. And for Narendra Modi, the calculation is complex. India has fought wars with China. Indian soldiers have clashed with Chinese troops as recently as 2020, in the deadly skirmishes of Galwan. Trust is thin, tensions are real. Yet India cannot ignore the reality of geography, nor the weight of economics. By appearing in China, Modi demonstrates to the West that India is not a client state. It is not bound by American dictates. It will pursue its own interests, whether that means buying Russian oil or shaking hands with Xi Jinping. It is a subtle assertion of independence, a declaration that India's path is its own. But let's not be fooled. This gathering is not built on friendship. It is built on necessity, on shared frustrations, on overlapping interests that may at times diverge more than they converge. India fears China's rise. China distrusts India's closeness with the United States. Russia depends too heavily on both, but knows it cannot afford to alienate either. So what holds them together, at least for now, is the pressure of the West. It's the sanctions, the tariffs, the constant rhetoric of democracy versus autocracy. When pushed, they respond with unity. But beneath the surface, tensions bubble. To really grasp the weight of this moment, we have to look back at the history that binds and separates these nations. Think of 1962, when India and China fought a brief but bloody war over their disputed border. That war ended with humiliation for India and mistrust that lingers to this day. Fast forward to the 1970s. when India signed a treaty of friendship with the Soviet Union, ensuring Moscow's support during the Bangladesh Liberation War. For decades, Russia was India's most trusted partner, supplying weapons, nuclear technology, and diplomatic cover at the United Nations. Meanwhile, China and Russia, once bitter rivals under the shadow of Mao and Stalin, eventually found common cause after the Cold War, building energy pipelines, military cooperation, and a shared resentment of U.S. dominance. These historical currents converge today. India still relies on Russian arms. Russia relies on Indian and Chinese markets. China sees both as crucial pieces in its grand project to build alternatives to Western institutions through BRICS, through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, through its Belt and Road Initiative. And so, while history divides them, geopolitics pulls them together. Now, think of the optics again. Jinping standing as host, flanked by Modi on one side and Putin on the other. It is not just about who is present, but about who is absent. There is no Joe Biden here, no Emmanuel Macron, no Rishi Sunak or Olaf Scholz. The message is clear. The West is not the only game in town. Power is shifting. New poles are rising. And the camera lenses broadcasting this image across the world do the rest of the work. But symbolism alone does not change reality. The real question is, can these three leaders translate optics into outcomes? Can they build trust, coordinate strategies, and offer real alternatives? Or is this simply a show, a moment of solidarity without substance? Consider the economic stakes. India's economy, battered by tariffs, must find new markets. Russia, cut off from Europe, must keep selling oil, gas, and weapons. China, facing slowing growth and internal economic troubles, must expand its sphere of influence abroad. Each has something to gain. India wants energy, security, and freedom from Western pressure. Russia wants survival. China wants leadership. Together, they may find ways to cooperate, at least in the short term. But cooperation has limits. India does not want to be subsumed into China's orbit. Russia does not want to be reduced to a junior partner. And China, though powerful, does not fully trust either. So, while the summit may produce joint declarations, pledges of solidarity, and grand speeches, the reality is more fragile. One border clash, one trade dispute, one misstep could fracture the illusion of unity. And yet, sometimes illusions matter. Sometimes the image of unity is enough to shift perceptions, to make rivals think twice, to create the impression of strength where weakness exists. This is why the summit matters, even if its concrete outcomes are modest. 'Cause in geopolitics, perception often shapes reality. Now imagine the ripple effects. In Washington, policymakers are watching nervously. Will India drift further away from the U.S.? Will Russia become even more dependent on China? Will she succeed in building a true alternative order? In Europe, leaders worry about losing influence in Asia, about being sidelined in a world where the U.S. no longer calls all the shots. In Tokyo, in Canberra, in Seoul, governments are recalculating, wondering if America's alliances are enough to contain the momentum of this new axis. And in the global south, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Middle East, the optics resonate even more. Leaders there see Xi, Modi, and Putin standing together, and they ask themselves, is it time to hedge? Is it time to diversify partnerships, to play both sides, to extract more from both East and West? It's a psychological effect of the summit ripples far beyond the walls of the meeting hall. But let's pause and ask a deeper question. Is this truly a turning point, or just another chapter in the endless play of power? History teaches us that alliances of convenience often crumble. The United States and China were once Cold War partners against the Soviet Union, only to become rivals later. Russia and China once clashed bitterly despite being communist neighbors. India itself has shifted over the decades, from non-alignment to Soviet partnership, from Soviet partnership to American friendship, and now perhaps to a new balancing act. So, what we may be witnessing is not the birth of a permanent alliance, but a snapshot of necessity, a temporary coalition forged by circumstance. Yet, even temporary coalitions can shift the trajectory of global politics. They can buy time, change narratives, and alter the confidence of nations. And so, as the summit unfolds, as handshakes are exchanged, as cameras capture the smiles and the carefully staged symbolism, the real drama is not in the speeches, but in the undercurrents. In the way India signals to Washington that it has options. In the way Russia signals to Europe that it still has power. In the way China signals to the entire world that it can orchestrate unity in defiance of the West. This is why the optics are powerful. Because they do not just reflect reality, they shape it. Because they do not just show leaders, they show choices. Because they do not just capture a moment, they hint at a movement. And as we watch this drama unfold, one truth becomes clear. The world we knew, a world dominated by the West, a world structured by American leadership, a world where others followed. That world is fading. In its place, something more fragmented, more contested, more multipolar is emerging. And in Tianjin, for one carefully staged moment, we see that world taking shape. Whether it lasts, whether it delivers substance, whether it reshapes the order, that is uncertain. But the image, the performance, the optics themselves are already history.